On April 5, 1892, 52 armed men boarded a private train in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The curtains were drawn, the doors were locked. In one man's pocket was a list of 70 names, and every man on it was to be shot or hanged. 4 days later, in a burning cabin on the Powder River, a small rancher named Nate Champion wrote with a pencil, "Boys, I feel pretty lonesome just now. I wish there was someone here with me so we could watch all sides at once." When the roof caught, he came out the back door with a revolver in one hand and a rifle in the other. 4 men fired at once, 28 bullets. Number 6 was not a gun at all. And the weapon at number 1 appears twice in this story, once on each side, because the second time it was pointed back at them. Here is what almost nobody knows. Every gun those 52 men carried was written down. Make, caliber, serial number, owner, year of manufacture. It sits in the National Archives. Nobody wrote down what the 70 men had behind their own doors. Subscribe, because this list gets heavier the closer we get to number 1. Let's count them down. Number 25. The Marlins that were not there. Start with an absence. Marlin was a serious rifle maker in 1892. Their lever guns competed directly with Winchester, and working men owned them. Go through Major Wolcott's surrender inventory, and there is not a single Marlin, not one, out of 52 men. Colt for the revolvers, Winchester for the rifles. That kind of uniformity does not happen by accident among men who arm themselves independently. It happens when somebody buys in bulk. Every gun on their side has a number in a federal file. Not one door in Johnson County had its contents recorded. Number 24. The belts, the holster, and the scabbard. Wolcott did not stop at firearms. Buck Garrett turned in a Winchester, 1 belt, and a holster. W.A. Wilson turned in a rifle, 1 belt, and a scabbard. A D. Adamson turned in 60 cartridges along with his. The Army required an accounting of leather. Every strap a man wore into that county was property somebody had purchased, distributed, and counted afterward. That is the line running through this whole list. Their gear was issue, from an organization with a budget. The other side had whatever they had, and nobody ever asked them for an inventory. Number 23. W.B. Wallace's Winchester Model, 1873, serial number 54763, made in 1880, chambered in 44 WCF. Wallace turned it in with 1 cartridge belt. Beside his name in the ledger is a single word of description. Englishman, not a Texan, not a detective. A cattleman and an Englishman, riding into an American county with a rifle and a list of 70 Americans to be killed. His rifle has a serial number and a year of manufacture on permanent record, and a 1-word note about who he was. Nick Ray's rifle has nothing. Number 22. J.C. Johnson's Webley, the only non-American handgun in the entire invasion. Johnson was one of the hired Texans, and he carried a Webley in .44. The list has no serial number for it and no model, just the maker and the caliber. A Webley is a British service revolver, and it is a strange thing to find in a Texas gunman's hand on a Wyoming range. Somewhere behind that entry is a story nobody wrote down. He was not the only man thinking about it either. Hold that, because the next number belongs to someone who came carrying ammunition for it. Number 21. A B. Clark's 50 Webley cartridges. Clark was a cattleman. He surrendered a Winchester Model 1873, made in 1888, along with 150 44 WCF cartridges for it, and 50 Webley cartridges. Clark had no Webley, Johnson did. So one man on that train was carrying spare ammunition for another man's foreign revolver, which means somebody planned the resupply and knew exactly who had what. That is not neighbors grabbing rifles. That is logistics. Every round was counted at the end of it. Nobody counted what was in a Homesteader's coat pocket. Number 20. J. N. Tisdale Smith & Wesson, serial number 15897. Of every handgun surrendered, all were Colts but 2. Johnson's Webley, and this one. Tisdale was a cattleman, and his revolver was a Smith & Wesson in .44 Smith & Wesson. One man out of 52 went his own way on the Maker, and it only survives because a defeated officer had to account to the United States Army for every weapon his men brought. 1 Smith & Wesson. It has a number. It is in the archive. Collectors have studied it. Nick Ray's rifle is not in any archive anywhere. Understand where these guns came from. The hired men were recruited in and around Paris, Texas, and put on a train north. On April 5th, they reached Denver, where Wyoming ranchers met them and issued new Winchesters in 45-90 and 38-55. From there, they ran to Cheyenne with the curtains pulled and the doors locked, and were coupled to a special train made up of a passenger car, a baggage car, 3 stock cars, and a flat car. The terms were $5 a day and $50 for every man killed. That is what these rifles were. Not a tool a man saved a season for. Payroll equipment with a bonus schedule attached. Number 19. The 4 Martini single shots. 4 Martini rifles came off that train, and everyone was carried by a cattleman. Not a Texan, not a detective, a cattleman. The Martini is a British pattern falling block single shot, a military rifle rather than a frontier one. Slow and precise. A repeater is for a fight you did not choose. A single shot is for a shot you have decided to take, at distance, at a man who does not know you are there. 4 of the wealthiest men in Wyoming brought exactly that into Johnson County. All 4 are on the list. Number 18. The 2 Sharps rifles in .40 caliber. 2 men carried what the advertisements had called the Old Reliable. By 1892, the Sharps belonged to a finished era. It was a single shot, it was heavy, and it would hit what a man aimed at further out than most riflemen could even see. The hide hunts it was built for were over. One was carried by a stock detective who passed over a repeater to take it. The other belonged to the oldest man on the expedition, and that is number 17. Number 17. Elias Whitcomb's Sharps and his Colt. Whitcomb was the oldest of the invaders, and he brought the older weapon. His revolver is on the list too. A Colt single-action Army, serial number 140710, chambered in .41 Colt, manufactured in 1891. 1-year-old when he rode north. An old man with an obsolete rifle and a new pistol, riding out to kill men he considered a nuisance to his business. Both guns are documented. Whitcomb's revolver has been identified and traced by collectors who can match the serial to the name. Nobody has ever traced a single gun belonging to any of the 70. Number 16. The Colts nobody can positively identify. Here the record fights back. Wolcott recorded some revolvers by maker, caliber, and serial only, without the model. That matters because Colt numbered its lines in separate series. There may be a single-action Army, a Model 1877, and a Model 1878, all wearing serial number 11697. So D.R. Tisdale's Colt in .41, L.H. Parker's, and W.J. Clark's in .38 sit in the ledger as probable Model 1877s. Probable. Researchers have spent decades working serial by serial to pin them down. That effort has gone into the invaders' sidearms. None of it exists for the defenders. Number 15. W.C. Irvine's rifle and the shells in the barn. Irvine's entry is damaged. The caliber is partly illegible and shows only .45. The model is uncertain, though it appears to be an 1876. And Irvine carried no handgun at all, rifle only. Here is the detail that earns the number. Some 45-75 shell casings were found in the barn at the TA Ranch, where the invaders were besieged. The 45-75 is the 1876 cartridge. Somebody can stand in that barn today, pick up brass, and connect it to a damaged line in a surrender ledger from 1892. That is the resolution of the record on their side, down to the empties. Number 14. G.R. Tucker's Colt Single Action Army, serial number 293, 293. The Single Action Army went into production in 1873, and Wolcott's ledger dates this one to that first year. An extremely early example of the most famous revolver in America. 19 years later, a hired Texan carried it into Johnson County. That gun had already been somewhere in somebody's hands through nearly 2 decades of whatever the frontier was doing, and it ended in the fist of a man being paid $50 a head. We know its number because the Army made him hand it over. We do not know what Nick Ray owned. Read the list by roll, and a pattern appears that nobody had to write down. Most of the big bore rifles, the Winchester 1876s and 1886s, were carried by the cattlemen and the stock detectives. The hired Texans mostly carried Model 1873s. The men who paid for the invasion armed themselves best, and the men doing the work got the older, lighter, cheaper rifle. Even inside a private army, the money sat at one end of the column and the labor at the other, and you can read which was which off the caliber. Then remember what they did before a shot was fired. They cut the telegraph lines out of Buffalo so a county could not call for help. And they brought 2 newspaper reporters so the account reaching the eastern papers would be theirs. Number 13. The Barling Brothers Colts. J. Barling, Colt Single Action Army, Serial 139904, 45. Colt, made in 1891. Bob Barling, Colt Single Action Army, Serial 142792, 45. Colt, made in 1891. The ledger notes it plainly beside each name. Brother to Bob, brother to Jay. 2 brothers from Texas, 2 Colts from the same year, riding together into a county neither had seen, to kill men neither had met. Whatever brought them there, they went together, and the government kept both numbers. Number 12. The 1892 Colts. 3 revolvers on that list were manufactured the same year they were carried. Phil Dufresne, a detective, Serial 144414. Will Armstrong, a Texan, Serial 144682. Buck Garrett, a Texan, Serial 145105. All single-action armies in 45 Colt, all 1892. These were new guns, months old, perhaps weeks. An operation buying brand new revolvers for hired men in the same season it means to use them is an operation with money and a schedule. Somebody was equipping this thing right up to the departure date. Every serial went into a federal record group and stayed there. Number 11. K. Pickard's Matched Pair. Pickard was a Texan, and he is the only man on the entire list who did something most people assume every frontiersman did. His Colt Single Action Army, Serial 116184, is chambered in 44 WCF. His Winchester Model 1873, Serial 251649, is chambered in 44 WCF. He also turned in 120 cartridges, 1 caliber, rifle and revolver eating from the same box. Out of 52 armed men, exactly 1 thought that mattered. The famous idea of the matched frontier pair turns out to be almost entirely absent from the best documented gunfight of the era. Number 10. Mike Chauncey's Colt and What the Detectives Chose. Chauncey's Single Action Army, Serial 97587, was made in 1883 and chambered in 45 Colt. He was a stock detective, and the detectives were the professional core of this expedition. There were 7. 5 carried Winchester Model 1886s. 1 took a sharp single shot. The 7th, W.H. Tabor, appears to have carried an 1876. Those are not the choices of men expecting a brawl. Those are the choices of men expecting to shoot from cover, at range, at somebody who cannot reach them. Every one of their guns is on the list. Number 9. Frank Canton's Colt, Serial number 55728. Wolcott recorded no maker for this one and no caliber, just a serial number and a note that it was probably a single-action army. Frank Canton was one of the leaders of the invasion, and he is the man who carried the death list, 70 names in his pocket, north from Cheyenne. So the ledger is thin on the pistol of the man carrying the list of who was to die. Even incomplete, it is more than exists for any one of the 70. He has a number, they have nothing. Number 8. J.D. Manette's Colt Single Action Army, Serial number 135929. Made in 1890, chambered in .45 Colt. Manette was one of the hired Texans. His full entry is among the most quoted lines in the whole document. 1 Colt, serial 135929. 1 Winchester. 1 cartridge belt. A complete accounting of one man's armament on a specific day in April of 1892, and it survived because the Army required it. He was earning $5 a day, with 50 more promised for every man he killed in a county he had never seen, hunting names he could not have recognized. The government kept the serial number of his pistol. Number 7. J.D. Manette's Winchester 4590, serial number 42164. The same man's rifle, the same line, the same ledger. The 4590 is one of the 2 calibers issued at Denver on the 5th of April, which makes it very likely this rifle was not his own. It was handed to him days before. Part of the outfit, part of the deal. So a hired gun rode into a Wyoming spring with a borrowed rifle and a borrowed caliber, chasing a bounty on strangers. We know the number stamped on that rifle more than a century later. We do not know what Nick Ray owned. There was no list for him. Number 6. The Dynamite. They did not only bring guns. By one witness's account, the men who left Cheyenne on April 5th boarded with dynamite, rifles, and enough ammunition to kill all the people in the state of Wyoming. Dynamite is not a weapon for a gunfight. Dynamite is for structures. You bring it when you expect men to be inside buildings, and you have already decided the buildings will not protect them. That single item reframes the expedition. Not a manhunt across open country. A demolition, with a list of who lived in each house. At the KC Ranch, what they used was a hay wagon, set alight and pushed against the cabin wall. And then the county woke up. 2 men passing near the KC saw what was happening and rode for Buffalo. Sheriff William Red Angus raised a posse of 200 and went out after them. 200 in a matter of hours, from a county with its wires cut. They ran the invaders to ground at the TA Ranch on Crazy Woman Creek and held them 2 days until one man slipped out and reached the acting governor, Amos W. Barber, and telegrams to Washington brought President Benjamin Harrison to declare a state of insurrection and send the army from Fort McKinney. 200 armed Wyoming men surrounded that ranch. Almost none of their rifles were ever recorded by anybody. Number 5. The 17 Winchester Model 1886s. This is the signature weapon of the invasion. 17 of the long guns surrendered were Model 1886s, the largest single block in the arsenal, and the most popular chambering among them was the 4590. The 1886 was John Browning's design, the strongest lever action anyone had built to that point, made to handle cartridges that would wreck a lighter rifle. In 1892, it was only 5 years on the market, and already the rifle a serious man wanted. These were the new guns from Denver, carried at the wealthy end of the column, while the hired Texans made do with older 1873s. 5 of the 7 stock detectives carried one, 17 rifles, 17 serial numbers, all of them in the National Archives, every one traceable to a named man and a year of manufacture. Hold that rifle in your mind. You will see it again at number 1. Number 4. The Texas Kid's Winchester Model 1873. D.E. Book was young, and the men called him the Texas Kid. His Colt single-action Army, serial 120241 45 Colt, made in 1887, is on the list with the rest. But it is his rifle that matters. A Winchester Model 1873 and 38 WCF. Book is the invader reputed to have fired the first shot that hit Nate Champion when Champion came out of the burning cabin. Consider what that means for this list. The rifle that opened on a man running from his own house in the last seconds of his life is documented. Make, model, caliber. We can say what it was. He was a hired boy from Texas with a bounty on the man he shot, and history kept better track of his rifle than of the man who died in front of it. Number 3. Herman Fraker's 18-pound Sharps and Red Angus's Colt. Now the other side, and there is almost nothing. At the TA Ranch, A man known as Old Dan Boone, whose real name was Herman Fraker, fired on the besieged invaders with a Sharpson .45, 2 7/8 inch, recorded as an 18-pound Sharps. 18 pounds, closer to a piece of artillery than a saddle gun. And Sheriff William Red Angus's Colt single-action army survives in the collection of the Wyoming State Museum. That is it. Beyond those two and champions, few guns with any provenance to the men on the death list are known at all. 52 invaders, every weapon cataloged to the serial number. 200 defenders, and history kept 2 rifles and a revolver. That is not an accident of survival. That is a record made by the winners and preserved by an army. Number 2. Nate Champion's Colt single-action army in .45. They had come for him before. In an earlier attempt on his life, Champion woke to find attackers in the room, took a Colt from under his pillow, and fired, wounding them, one mortally, and came out of it with powder burns on his face and nothing worse. Accounts differ on how many men came that night and on exactly who did the shooting. The exact details are not settled. The revolver is not in dispute. That is the gun. A .45 Colt single-action army. He had used it once already to stay alive, and had spent the months since knowing they would be back. On the morning of April 9, 1892, it was in the cabin with him. When the burning wagon took the wall and the roof caught, he signed the last entry in his journal, put the notebook in his pocket, and came out the back door with that Colt in his left hand. 4 men fired at once, 28 bullets. There is no serial number for it in any archive. There is only a man carrying it out of a burning house rather than surrender to men who bought their guns by the crate. Number 1. Nate Champion's Winchester Model 1886. In his right hand was a Winchester Model 1886. Go back to number 5. That is the same model the Cattlemen's Association issued its own men, the big Browning lever gun, the most serious rifle in the invading column, carried by the wealthy end of the line and by 5 of the 7 professional detectives. Nate Champion had one already. He was a small rancher running about 200 head, a Texas-born cowhand from Leander who came north and built something modest. He owned the same rifle the Barons handed their hired killers, and it was in his cabin before any of them boarded a train. That is the whole war in one object. 17 of those rifles came out of crates, went into an inventory, and ended in a government file where you can look up the numbers today. One was already sitting in a cabin on the Powder River, and it is the only rifle on that side of the fight history knows at all. We know it because the man holding it died in the doorway. They wrote down their guns. Nobody wrote down his. 2 documents came out of Johnson County in April of 1892. The first was a list of 70 names, carried north in one man's pocket, of people to be shot or hanged. The second was Major Wolcott's inventory of every rifle, revolver, cartridge, and belt his men handed over when the Army ended it. Wolcott was a former Union officer from Kentucky. His list went into the National Archives, sat for 70 years, and was found in the 1960s by a researcher named Robert A. Murray, who published it in Shooting Times in 1967 under the title, The Arms of Wyoming's Cattle War. Every charge against the invaders was eventually dismissed. One list counted men to be killed, the other counted the tools, and the tools are what survived, with the serial numbers intact. Nobody made a list of what the 70 men owned. We have an 18-pound Sharps, a sheriff's Colt in a museum case, and a rifle a dying man carried into his own yard. Which one would you have wanted behind that cabin door on the 9th of April? Tell me the number in the comments. Subscribe, because there are darker nights and stranger guns still to come.